Good evening and shalom, everybody, and welcome to this next edition of Jerusalem Dispatch, the live webinar. My name's Len Grates. I'm the Operations Director for the ICEJ in the UK, and I'm privileged to be your host tonight. We've given Simon Barrett the sack just for the evening. I'll explain more as we go through the evening, but we hope that tonight's it will be quite a sobering program because Simon and Reagan will be giving reports from a recent visit to Israel, but we hope it'll bring you into a closer connection with the land of Israel and just give you further insights as to what we as a ministry are seeking to do. Simon and Reagan were at the annual Envision Leaders Conference, which is a conference that the ICEJ hosts every year for leaders from around the world, and many of those who go for the first time, and they're being exposed to the teaching of God's purposes for Israel, and so it's a great blessing to many people, and we're thrilled to be able to help Reagan go this year as as a leader. I'll explain who Reagan is in a moment, but we just want to thank God that God is moving in the midst of these tragic times. He's not stopped; he's still busy doing His will, and so we're thrilled to be able to report to you tonight, even though it's reporting some of the tragic events that took place on October the 7th. You'll see firsthand some of the things that both Simon and Reagan experienced, and we're looking forward to hearing their stories. So before we go any further, I'm just going to pray for the evening, and then we're going to see a short video which basically just gives you a little introduction to the work of Envision, the conference of Envision that we hold every year. So let's just pray and commit the evening to the Lord. Father, thank you that we can gather in your name tonight and come under the authority and rulership of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. And we invite you, Holy Spirit, to come and speak to us all, to challenge us, to inform us, to equip us for prayer. We pray for Simon and Reagan as they share some of their experiences, that you'll give them the freedom to be able to communicate what's on your heart. And we just give you thanks, Lord, that tonight we're able to focus on the tragic events, but with hope in our hearts, Lord, because you work all things together for good. And we're praying for good. We don't know how it happens, Lord, but we know that you are supernaturally over and above all things. So we're putting our trust in you tonight to challenge us, to reveal to us insights that we need to understand further. And so we just commit this evening to you with grateful hearts in the name of Jesus. Amen. So we're going to watch this video, and then shortly after that we're going to be seeing another video, and I just want to forewarn you that you do need a little bit of discretion watching the second video, just in case you've got any of your kids around or anything like that. Just be aware that it might be a little bit insightful and challenging. So let's look at this first video, which is an introduction to the Envision conference in Jerusalem.
I'm Jürgen Bühler, and I'd like to invite you to join me on a very special Pastors and Leaders Conference here in Jerusalem. We are going to take you to strategic places that demonstrate the atrocities that took place on October 7, and you will see with your own eyes the tragic events that took place on that day. You will meet with pastors, leaders, and experts. They will give you insight on the both political but also, even more important, the spiritual significance and information that you need to understand what is taking place right now, not only in Israel but all around the world. And also it will be a time, I believe, your faith will be strengthened when you see how Israel is coping with this current crisis. And most importantly, it will be your opportunity in this critical time to show your love and your solidarity with the people of Israel and with the nation that means so much for us. I look forward seeing you here in Jerusalem.
So Simon and Reagan did go to Jerusalem. They just came back last week. It was a very recent conference, and we're looking forward to hearing their reports. But one of the things that Simon visited, and we'll discuss this later on in the program, he went to see the car park, which now holds 1,300 burnt out vehicles that have been stacked up as a result of the terrible events of the October the 7th. It's quite shocking to see that there were so many vehicles that were destroyed by Hamas, and of course, in many of these vehicles there were people, and in a number of the vehicles, the people who died were unrecognizable after these attacks, and I was hearing recently how in one case they actually couldn't they could identify the remains, but they couldn't separate the people from the car, so they buried the car in respect. They didn't want to disrupt or disturb the holy remains of the people who died in the car. So it's a tragedy that took place, and of course we're still seeing it all worked out. So let's have a look at this video, and then I'll introduce our speakers tonight. Thank you, Joanne.
Hi, this is Simon Barrett of Revelation TV in the UK. What you can see behind me is one of the cars that was attacked on October the 7th, the worst mass terrorist attack in Israel's history, where Israel was confronted by approximately 2,000 to 3,000 Hamas terrorists on that day. You can see the carnage they've done with the cars behind me, with these Iranian-supplied grenades that ignite and inflame these cars and actually burn them to ashes. And for those people who really do question whether October the 7th happened, well, here's the crime scene. Here's the evidence of the mass murders that took place on October the 7th. And it's a reminder of the world to wake up, to realize this is terrorism. This is the worst kind of terrorism that we've seen in decades, certainly comparable to 9/11. And the magnitude of the destruction that occurred on October the 7th is nothing less than absolutely horrific and evil. And you can see with the evidence behind the total carnage caused by Hamas back on October the 7th. I want to take you back to October the 7th, and you can see behind me how this beautiful black Audi has been absolutely shot to bits by Hamas terrorists, and around us we see the absolute carnage caused by Hamas on October the 7th. This is real, this happened, and you can see car after car after car just parked up here with their windscreens shot to bits, tyres burnt out. It's a scene of absolute carnage and absolute terror, and to be one of those Israeli drivers on October the 7th when Hamas carried out this terrorist attack must have been absolutely horrific. And the world needs to know what happened on October the 7th. This is equivalent of what happened in the Shoah or the Holocaust, to realise the true magnitude of the scale of this attack by Hamas back on October the 7th. As you can see, this was until recently a crime scene. This is the biggest crime scene I've ever seen. I'm sure the biggest crime scene that you've ever seen. But I want to show you this car because this just brings to life how personal this is. Because in this car, looks like these were just in Israeli day trippers. They packed their bags for the beach. And then you can see in the back seat is a children's book. And then in the front, personal items with pens, which makes it very, very personal of what happened. That these people did not expect to see what they saw on October the 7th. And it just brings that personal element that these were people, real people, who in one moment their life was just taken. And it describes really what the Bible talks about, is suddenly people are saying peace and safety, and suddenly there is no safety. We can see this with here, this sudden terrorist attack on October the 7th by Hamas, and that these are real people who drove these cars on October the 7th. So what we can see in this car is that these poor people had absolute no chance of survival, going on a family day out to the beach to the south, and then to be confronted by Hamas terrorists on October the 7th is just beyond horrific. Words can't describe the magnitude of what we're seeing here, the total destruction by Hamas, killing innocent Israeli civilians in their car who had no self-defense, no way of getting out of those situations. And you wonder why Israel is launching a military operation into Gaza to destroy Hamas. Well, it's because of this.
Well, thank you. That gives us a little glimpse at the evil and horrendous things that took place on that day that's burnt into our memories now, the day that will changes everything. So, yeah, thank you, Simon, for recording that. So I'd like to introduce our guest tonight. Keep in mind as we're going through this that these are real events, these are real people, and as supporters of the ICEJ in the UK, your prayers and your finances are making a difference. They're touching people's lives. I was speaking to a Jewish leader not so very long ago here in the UK, and he just simply said, please tell your Christian friends to keep praying. And so we must keep doing that, and thank you for your prayers, that they are making a difference. So as we go through tonight, let the Lord speak to you as to how you can become a true witness of these events. Maybe I want to encourage you even now, this is being recorded and will be available on our website. Send it around to your friends and people who may be a bit skeptical, because one of the things that we all need to do is stand up for the truth and get the truth out there, even though that might be painful. Let me introduce to you our guests tonight. It's a delight to have Pastor Regan King with us. Regan is based in London, in Angel, and is planting a church there, which I believe was started in 2007. He's a preacher, he's a teacher, he's involved in biblical counseling on one-to-one. He's also oversees a thrice weekly food bank with food provision services. He's also part of Grace Church, Walthamstow planting team, and serves as the CEO of a pregnancy crisis helpline. And I believe he's also an author. And he also co-hosts a weekly TV program with Simon on Revelation TV called Behind the Headlines. So it's a delight to have you with us, Regan. I'll come back to you in a moment, and maybe you could introduce yourself a little bit further. But here's our other guest. And of course, he's so familiar to every one of us, he needs a little introduction. But maybe I've got some information about him that you didn't know about. So let me introduce Simon Barrett. It's an absolute privilege and delight to be working closer with Simon and to have him as part of the ICEJ UK team, helping us in the media area. So we're blessed to be in friendship and fellowship with him. He's married and he lives in Surrey. As you know, he's a TV journalist, and he produces the Revelation TV, the weekly program called the Middle East Report, and that's on at 9 o'clock every Friday. And you should go and make that a regular diary in your diary. And also, if you go to the Revelation website, you can see the back catalogue of programs there. Of course, Revelation TV is a Christian channel. It's on Sky. It's also on FreeServe as well. You can get it beamed straight into your home. It's global, has a global audience, and the Middle East Report, which Simon's been presenting now for many years, includes up-to-date news on the Middle East, and he interviews high-caliber guests, including Israeli ambassador, Israeli and British ministers of state, and Bible teachers. He also produces a weekly current affairs program called Behind the Headlines, which he does with Reagan. And it's a monthly program for us, which is what we're doing for ICEJ and our monthly TV program, which goes out on the first Monday of every month, Jerusalem Dispatch, on Revelation TV, and repeated the following Thursday. So please, if you're wanting to stay updated in what's happening out there in the Middle East, tune into these programs. And also, Simon produces another program called Politics Today, which specializes in issues affecting Christians in politics. And he's also, he used to host a program based in the heart of Europe, the European Parliament, called the European Report. Recently, he's produced a new program called the Knesset Report, with interviews with leading Israeli parliamentarians, including Dr. Michael Oren. Simon's also produced a 3-part documentary looking into the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. So we really welcome you both, and thank you for joining us tonight and giving us your time. Reagan, I wonder if this is your first time on the Jerusalem Dispatch. Why don't you just share with us just a little bit about your background? I know you grew up in the US, and now you're living in the capital of the world, London. Well, actually, Jerusalem's the capital of the world, isn't it? But anyhow, now you're here. Tell us about yourself.
Well, it's such a privilege to be able to join this webcast with ICEJ UK. Thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you especially to Simon, really, for introducing me to you guys at ICEJ. It was such a privilege to join the Envision trip last week. I need to find where that bio is. I need to update a couple of elements of it. I no longer lead the pregnancy crisis helpline. I handed that on, but I'm still very much involved in pro-life endeavors. And after handing that on, I've undertaken a couple of additional programs with Revelation TV, one particularly called Bible Topics, where we have unpacked some of the theological underpinnings of our support as Christians for Israel. And I'm married. I have 2 children. My wife grew up in Jerusalem, just outside of Jerusalem, actually, in an area called Ma'al Adumim. She's of a Jewish background, and our 2 children, Randall and Ariel, are 3 and 2. Randall just started attending Simon Mark's Jewish primary school, which is in our local area. So we enjoy really good and close connections with our small Islington Jewish community, and are thankful for that privilege.
Thank you. Great names there. Ariel. And what was the other one?
Randall. He has a Hebrew name as well, Rani Nachum, after his late grandfather.
Wow. Well, I look forward to just catching up on a one-to-one, hearing more about you. And Simon, we often just see you presenting programs, and I guess some people might say, well, tell us a little bit about yourself, Simon. How did you come to faith in Yeshua?
Yeah, well, firstly, Len, you're doing a great job presenting and hosting.
Don't get too comfortable because I want him back next month. You're doing a great job. No, I think I came to faith at a very early age. I have a very godly mother who loves the Lord, and she had a big influence on me. But I've always grown up, even in my childhood, knowing the presence of God in my life. And when I was 14, I realized the significance of the cross, and that's when I truly gave my life to the Lord. But even from an early age, I knew that what the Lord wanted from me was complete surrender. He wanted all of my life in its entirety. I was a big fan of Eric Liddell, the famous Olympic athlete who wouldn't run on Sundays. Athletics was my thing at school. So I followed in his footsteps and I refused to run on Sunday. I got quite a lot of flack from that, particularly because a lot of the cross-country race meetings took place on Sunday. I kind of enjoyed going against the crowd. And it wasn't until about when I was doing my GCSEs, when I was 16. Firstly, when I was 15, I was very touched and moved by the Iraq War, which became the first media war when I was 15, asking questions like, why is the international community so concerned about this little state in the Middle East called Israel getting involved? And then about a year later, the Lord gave me a vision. And I firstly gave up my running because it was becoming first in my life. And then the Lord gave me a vision of Revelation 8 and 9, his purposes and plans for Israel. That came supernaturally. And then ever since then, I'd read every book, I'd watch every documentary, I'd read every article. But it wasn't until I was at university back in from 95 to 98 that I went to Israel for the first time in 96 with the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I did an All-Pan, I learned Hebrew, and also toured the country and had lectures and seminars. And so really it felt like I'd come home. And, to having discussions with my fellow students, talking about where are we in terms of the Middle East peace process. Benjamin Netanyahu was the prime minister. I didn't think that I'd actually get paid to be talking about these things as a living. So God is faithful, he's great. And ever since those early formative years, my heart and my passion has been with Israel and the Jewish people. And that's why it's a pleasure to be with ICEJ UK and actually to be part of the Envision conference that took place last week. And I want to just say on reflection that I've been to Israel, must be around 30 times, but last week was one of the most special times I've ever been in Israel, despite the fact that Israel's at war, despite the fact there's only one airline carrier flying to Israel, and that's Al Al, and despite the fact that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office have given a apocalyptic warning not to visit Israel, and you couldn't get any insurance. I still very much wanted to go. So it was an absolute pleasure to be with Jürgen Bühler and David Parsons and the other leaders.
Mm. Well, we're very blessed here in the UK having you doing what you're doing, Simon. You're a real pioneer and a faithful man in keeping the programs going on the Middle East and keeping us informed. So we bless you for doing that. Regan, what was your thoughts when you were initially invited to go on the Envision conference? It may have come a bit out of the blue.
In some ways it did, and yet in other ways it was very much an answer to prayer. My wife and I, with family there in Israel and with friends and with a real heart and burden for the situation ever since we heard the horrible news that early morning on the 7th of October. And as we saw things unravel, had begun to pray that God would lead and help us to take opportunities and openings as he presented them to be a blessing to the Jewish community in London in whatever capacity we could possibly be. And then we were praying and looking into opportunities, openings to, if God desired that, to actually go and be in Israel for however long or short time, with recognizing, we have a calling and responsibilities here. So when Simon mentioned the Envision trip, and when I began to talk with ICEJ's David Elms and others, I was so grateful for that opportunity, and very much along with Simon in regards to the trips on which I've been to Israel. This one stands out. There was something particularly special about it, despite the nature of it, the harrowing nature of it. It was such a reminder of God's peace that he gives in truly chaotic, dire situations. I've never seen Jerusalem so subdued. I've never seen the people of Israel so subdued, yet there was a resolve and a resilience and an all-pervading sense of hope and joy as well that was very much reflected in the conversations and in the attitudes of those we encountered. So with that said, I was so grateful for the opportunity and took it as of the Lord.
Yeah, well, we're so pleased you could go. And Simon, as we know, Israel is in a state of war at the moment. Were you apprehensive about going into a war zone?
I've always wanted to be a war correspondent, Len. No, I was apprehensive about going because I was afraid of what kind of Israel am I going to see? How has the events of October the 7th had an impact on Israel? How has it had an impact on the Israelis? Am I going? What kind of Israel am I going into? That was my major concern. I wasn't fearful about going, but if anyone actually has time, takes time to read the Foreign Office travel warning, that was enough to make it to put you off for going for sure. I think we broke all the rules of the FCO office about where we should go and where we shouldn't go on this trip. So, and of course, you're in God's peace, but the incredible thing is that when you're there, you're in God's land, you're amongst his people. There's an incredible sense of peace. I mean, the one thing I noticed, for example, when I was there, I've never seen Israel so green. Couldn't believe how green Israel was at this time with these huge amounts of rainfall they're getting. The people themselves are there's almost as if they're going through a spiritual awakening right now. That God is opening up their hearts, and they're beginning to rediscover who they are, and they're beginning to discover that they have a special calling of God upon their lives. And I think there's a great spiritual awakening that has emerged since October the 7th. And I think reflecting on that, God is really working on their hearts. It's a country that is united in its fight against Hamas, and with the prospect of fighting against Hezbollah in the north. But the Israeli people, they don't want revenge. They want Hamas to be destroyed, but their number one top priority is to bring the hostages home.
Yeah, well, that certainly should be one of our top priorities for prayer, that we carry the hostages home. I was recently given one of these dog tags to remind us to bring them home.
Yeah, got one as well. Here we go, Len.
Okay, there we go. We're all in the same.
All through.
I just took mine off just before coming on. But anyhow, Reagan, what was your first impression of arriving in Israel? Post the horrific events of October the 7th, and the Hamas attacks. What were your first impressions there?
It was very surreal, and I was struck by the quietness. I was struck by the stillness compared to other times, other seasons in which I've been. I was struck by the green, which Simon spoke of. I have been around this time of year only once before in February, and it wasn't nearly so green as that. But again, the sense of resolve mixed with grief, mixed with quiet, firm resilience. Everywhere you go, you see the posters of the faces of hostages, and many of those tragically we're hearing in the past couple of days may well have lost their lives. It's not, they're saying could be 50 who were of that 136 remaining who have been killed. And so, you know, as you're going around, it's always in your face. There's always a reminder of why this war is occurring. And should anyone be tempted, and I highly doubt that there will be too many who lose sight of it or lose perspective. But the moment anyone would be tempted to lose perspective or to question, well, should this continue, or should we begin calling it a day or winding down? You turn the corner and there's on a hotel a full screen basically all the way down the length of the hotel with all of the faces and the names and the ages. And so this is a people who are resilient. The testimonies we heard of people, the new friends I've made, I know Simon has had some of these friends for ages who have shared of the tremendous loss of life that they've experienced, and you're talking in a normal way, so that they're experiencing that grief, but they're progressing forward, and they have a sense of purpose and resolve. Those are the things that really stood out to me as a first impression.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess it would be very different for us all if we were to go back to Israel. It wouldn't be the same Israel that we visited years ago or months ago. Simon, you know, you and Reagan both attended the government press office conference in Jerusalem. You know, can you tell us what the Israeli government are doing with, you know, what's the priority for getting the hostages home?
Yeah, it was a privilege to invited to the GPO press conference. The GPO directly work for the Prime Minister's office. I know them very well because ever since 2017, I've attended the Christian Media Summit that they've organised. So we get to visit the president's residence. We get addressed by the Prime Minister, ministers of state, and yeah, it's an incredible few days that they put on each year. So to actually attend this press briefing, you really sense that the priority for the Israeli government and the priority of the Israeli people is this incredible resolve to bring the hostages home. And you would have thought that a nation being in a war, a nation that has had over 1,200 of their citizens murdered by Hamas, the worst pogrom we've seen since the Holocaust, their priority would be, let's smash and destroy Hamas so this happens again. But that's not the sense you get in Israel. That's not the sense you get with the Israeli government and with Israel's institutions. It's all about trying to bring the hostages home. So we were addressed by the chief hostage negotiator on behalf of Israel, talking about getting the hostages home. We heard harrowing personal stories of the families of the hostages telling their story about how their loved ones were kidnapped on October the 7th by Hamas. You know, we've had one incredibly moving story of a German father whose son is German, and they're born again Christian family, but he died recently fighting in Gaza. And you know, if we look back at history, 80 years ago, you know, the Germans were very much involved in murdering the Jewish people during the Second World War, and here we have a Christian who signed up to fight with the IDF, sacrifices his life to defend Israel in the aftermath of October the 7th, in which it became a national news story in Germany. And the German tabloid, the most popular German tabloid, with over 2 million readers, got the gospel because of this incredible family. So I think we're seeing this, you know, with the Israeli government, but particularly with the Israeli people, an incredible sense of unity and this incredible sense of desire to bring the hostages home, and that overrides everything.
Well, yeah, I guess that it's also very powerful here in the Jewish community, the desire to keep the pressure on the UK government, and we need to keep supporting the Jewish people in that. And you mentioned about the German young guy, Messianic believer. It's worthwhile just highlighting that actually Dr. Jürgen Bühler, the president of the ICEJ, his two sons are in the IDF, serving in the IDF. And I believe one of them is up in the northern border somewhere. So we need to keep these young people in our prayers. Reagan, yeah, we saw just before we started the interviews this video where Simon was up at the car park where these 1,300 cars are burnt up. What was it like for you to visit there? What were your thoughts about visiting there?
Throughout the entire trip, I continued to have these surreal moments of remembering the day as it played out. I had awakened very early in the morning, and you know, when you have a sense, certainly a spiritual sense of, I can't get back to sleep. I don't know why I can't get back to sleep. I don't know what's going on. I didn't really want to check my phone. I can't remember if I had checked to see if I had any messages. Sometimes I'll do that. But I just had a urgent sense to pray, and to pray for family. In particular, had a sense to pray for family and friends in Israel. We had only just visited a few weeks prior in September. We brought 25 people from the church to Jerusalem. And so I was just reflecting on and praying. And then about an hour and a half later, I thought, well, I'll get up. And I checked the phone, and BBC headlines had loaded, and there was a headline that was there saying that something had happened near Sederot, maybe something about a music festival, but immediately the headline changed. It was one of those things where, because it was a developing story, maybe there was a glitch in the system, maybe they took it down and put it back up. So I thought, oh, that's strange. So I just typed in Israel on Google and clicked news, and there was this developing story that at the time, I think it said maybe a 60-year-old grandmother had been killed in rocket fire in Sderot. And then there was a rumor of some Hamas attack on a nearby music festival, but it was a very early story. So I thought, oh, this is, I had a sense that something wasn't normal, that this wasn't just your normal terror attack that we hear of, where, you know, tragically one or two individuals lose their lives, or there's a few rockets that are shot down. As the next hour or 2 hours unfolded, began to see this is much, much more serious. I had gone out and then came back. I awakened my wife and said, you know, there's some problems, and she knew right away that this would mean her brother would be called up and that he would have to come out of reserves before we even knew the scale. So being there in that car park, it was incredibly surreal to see and to look and to think, well, I would have seen many of those cars in the video footage that was released, both aerial footage, footage from others within Israel, and the TikTok videos, and of course the Hamas released footage as well from the from their GoPro cameras and all sorts. And you know, I couldn't help but replay some of those videos in my mind, and I remember. On the trip, Rabbi Shmuel Bowman, he highlighted a particular van, and there was this van that was there, and inside you could look, and it was shut up. It was a group of elderly, old age pensioners headed to the Dead Sea for a day trip. All of them had been massacred. So when you read those stories and then you encounter the aftermath face to face, there's only one thing really that you can do, I think, in those moments, and that's pray and cry out to the Lord for justice. And there was a poignant sense of that as just in the very nearby horizon, you could see smoke rising from Khan Yunis, and just a reminder of the harrowing cost of just war, that this happened, but there is justice. And as Romans 13 says, the government does not bear the sword in vain. And so Israel is responding in a righteous way. So that really is what stood out to me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sure it was quite traumatic, just putting the jigsaw pieces together, seeing the vehicles all in one place, but recognizing that these were the vehicles we were seeing on the news headlines, and people were in them. It must have been quite traumatic. But Simon, you were there. You're a witness to all this. But there's people already saying that this really didn't happen the way we're being told it happened. What's your reply to those sort of statements?
Oh, well, those kind of statements make you incredibly angry. There's a righteous indignation that rises because people don't want to know the truth. I mean, I've had two personal encounters, one directly to my face, telling me that October the 7th was carried out by the IDF as a pretext for the invasion of Gaza to carry out genocide against the residents of Gaza. I've had emails regarding this as well. So to have that and to deal with October the 7th denial, which is, in my opinion, you can only equate that to Holocaust denial, is not only Jew hatred, but it's also satanic as well. So I think it was important to visit one of those three car parks where those cars, pretty much from the Nova Music Festival, were shot up and destroyed by Hamas on October the 7th. And when I did that video news report, the cars that were really burnt, Hamas used this special liquid that they got from the Iranians, which meant that a normal car set on fire would only be on fire for maybe 2 or 3 hours. But with this new device that the Israelis didn't even know was capable of, that Hamas had, literally burnt cars for 12 or 13 hours. And burning those inside. So what you're seeing is a crime scene, and it feels like, if what would I have been like if I was a British soldier and I was there in Germany and saw the liberation of Bergen-Belsen? Or what if I'd seen, for example, the pogroms committed by Imperial Russia against those ancient Jewish communities in Eastern Europe? It's exactly the same. It's like you are witnessing a massacre, genocide that will always stay with you for your life. But because you've seen it firsthand, that what happened was true, and you are an eyewitness account. Now, I did bring this back with me, and this is a shell of a sniper's bullet that a Hamas sniper would have used on October the 7th. Which has all been burnt up because obviously hit one of the cars and the shell's missing at the top. It's so important that we remember what happened on October the 7th. And what shocked me, I think, about when we went there, as a journalist, I'm used to reporting on these things. I'm used to dealing with these things. But what surprised me the most was the magnitude of what we saw on October the 7th. I knew as soon as the news reports were coming out, and I didn't trust the BBC, Sky or BBC to tell me what was happening in Israel. I tuned into I24, and when they said that Hamas was at between 22 and 26 different locations in Israel, I couldn't have understood then there must have been thousands of Hamas terrorists who were carrying out the biggest massacre the Jewish people have actually faced since the Holocaust over 80 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's far worse than we could ever imagine. We have a sort of a filtered news system, don't we? And some of the things that took place, which are beginning to leak out now, you think, wow, this was just evil personified. Yeah. So Reagan, how important is it that we as Christians sort of spread the news about the truth of what happened on October the 7th by Hamas?
Truth is absolute, it is concrete, it is objective, whatever it concerns, wherever it finds itself, whatever it's in relation to. And so there can be no room for sitting on the fence in regards to the events of October the 7th. The amount of misinformation, dishonesty, and really equivocating on the issue, particularly on various social media platforms, by people in some cases who should know better, has been quite jarring. We have to call a spade a spade. I know Simon has been very faithful in responding to some of those emails in various ways that he's received. I mean, we've lost people in our church community who have chosen to inexplicably, in some way, excuse what Hamas has done, or maybe not. They might take exception to that, but to downplay it and couch it in terms of whatever misgivings they have had based on misconceptions of Israel. And one of the things that we can do to, as Christians, really stand up for truth is when we hear people say that which is not true, call it for what it is. So if I hear people saying something that's not true, I'll say, okay, so where did you get that? Have you been? Have you seen? Do you know anyone there? Where did you get that? And almost every single time you begin to get this stuttering and stammering response. No, I've not been. Why would I go? No, I don't know anyone there. Oh, I heard it. And the reality is some of what they're saying, they've not even heard on the fallible and extremely flawed mainstream. They're just speaking in these terms that they picked up from social media. They don't know about what river and what sea. They don't understand the reality of the checkpoints. And if you want your own state, if you want your own governance, any nation has a checkpoint, does it not? I mean, we have checkpoints here. We have every border. If you want your own border, you have a checkpoint. And so this is news to people that they can't understand or grasp security. I went out to one of these hate marches on Saturdays that have polluted London ever since the first weekend. And I took a video camera with me and tried to engage people. Many were very unwilling to engage on camera, but others were. And we're talking low-hanging fruit, simple questions. Why are you here? What is your sign about? Tell me what you mean by that. Just basic questions that people cannot answer because they're following mob mentality. They're going along with the crowd. They're allowing themselves to get worked up. Some of these people, Lynn, do not even know October the 7th happened. They don't know. And you ask them and they say, oh, I don't. Literally, one girl said, I'm not educated enough on that to respond. So then why are you here? What's your sign about?
Yeah, we've seen too many idiots really on these marches. They just don't know what they're doing. Sorry to be so straight about it, but that's what they are. They don't understand. They just, as you say, they're following mob rule. Simon, we've got about 10 minutes left to be. This is going so fast here, but I'm going to amalgamate two questions here that maybe you can take them on. First of all, you went past the Nova Music Festival site on the way to kibbutz near Oz, and you saw, the total devastation of that. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But also, you met up with some IDF reservist soldiers at kibbutz Mafalsim. Can you give us some ideas of what that was like? What were they saying? What was your impressions?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, it's very moving, particularly. I mean, I remember seeing Ground Zero of 9/11 that took place in New York in 2004, and it was just a massive empty hole in the ground, and you could see, for example, still broken windows, and this was almost like almost 3 years after the horrific events of 9/11. Back in when I was in New York back in 2004. And so when you actually go past the Nova Music Festival site, you can't help thinking that you're literally seeing history, that here's a game-changing moment in history that has not only changed Israel, but changed the world. That day, 340 partygoers murdered in cold blood by Hamas. We saw devastation of the cars, the destruction that was caused then, and it leaves you with a kind of harrowing feeling. And then we visited Kibbutz Nir Oz. Now, back in December of 2022, I visited Kibbutz Narim, which is right next to Kibbutz Nir Oz, where we met the leaders of the Eshkol Regional Council. And of course, when the events of October the 7th occurred, my first thoughts were, what is the plight of those beautiful people that I met back in December of 2022? And then when we saw the complete devastation committed by Hamas at Kibbutz Nir Oz was horrific. You saw not only houses burnt and destroyed, you had posters of the hostages and their homes still in Gaza. You saw TV sets, like plasma screen TV sets on the ground, where residents of Gaza would have gone in and tried to steal television sets. Just the sheer evilness of it was horrific. But when you're there, you heard Israeli artillery bombs going off. We saw smoke from Gaza, and you knew that Israel was at war. But it wasn't until we actually met the Israeli IDF soldiers that you realized that they were so grateful that we'd been to Israel, that we'd come out and supported them and showing them that Christian love, that they really responded to that really well.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I guess that must have been quite moving, just meeting these people who are actually laying down their lives for the state. But of course, on the visit, you didn't just go and see these horrendous sites, but you visited the Knesset, I believe, and met some of the members of the Knesset. What was your impression of the Knesset, Reagan? Was that your first visit there?
Yes, I've been now to Israel about 8 times, and this was indeed the first visit to the Knesset, and what a privilege it was to observe and to see freedom, equal opportunities, and just a real sense of proper democracy at work. Every government system has its flaws, but I think we can see how democracy is such a wonderful and beautiful thing when it's healthily functioning, and it brings together people from different ideologies, different religions, and different understandings of things together for the common good of the nation. And that was so clearly evident in the Knesset. My main takeaway, in addition to that, was just what a place rich with biblical imagery. In no other government building or premise have I seen biblical imagery at almost every single point. And I found that a truly beautiful thing. Is, of course, the basis for all good government is God himself and the government that he enacts in giving us dominion over this world.
Yeah. And Simon, what was the response of the Knesset members to the solidarity visit, from you people, you guys being there? Because there was, how many of you? There were about 40?
70? Yeah, 70, so about 70 okay. of us from all over the world. I think people were just impressed that we were there. And the one thing you noticed, I think more than anything else, is the level of trust that not only high-ranking officials in the Israeli government, and we were addressed by Israel's Minister of Intelligence, to other members of the Knesset, the affection that they had for ICJ there was incredibly noticeable, and the level of trust as well. The fact that they wanted to come and talk to us, and again we heard there another message from one of the families of the hostages. Everywhere we went, we met members who had loved ones kidnapped on October the 7th. I mean, Dr. Jürgen Bühler spoke a very powerful message of telling us how we need to go back to our communities, we need to go back to our churches, we need to increase our prayers and show our visible support for Israel at this time, and rightly so. And you know, having visited Israel like Reagan and myself did last week, we just come away with saying that, you know, this is an incredibly resilient country. Many countries, after what Israel experienced on October the 7th, would have probably just caved. But there's a fortitude, there's a resilience, there's a, you know, with Jewish history, this is just another dark chapter in our history, and we'll overcome. And also what's quite amazing is I met up with my Israeli friends in Herzliya, and it's amazing to think a week ago I was with them, and they were saying something was really interesting. They were saying that they are so proud of the Israeli soldiers, the TikTok generation or Generation Z, that they thought that this generation just would not be able to fight, and how they are literally fighting like lions, being described, and they are warriors in their own right, like the generation of 1948, the generation of 67, the generation of 73. They're again going to be some of the greatest heroes in Israel's history, and I think that's something we can take away. But I just want to say that God is really answering prayers. The amount of miracles that we heard that occurred on October the 7th, the divine intervention, the fact that prior to October the 7th, if we look back at October the 6th, Israel was on the verge of civil war over the judicial reforms. And now we have a united nation, a nation that has purpose, a nation that has direction. And even going back on the plane on the way back at El Ala, I sat next to this Israeli guy who wanted to talk to me for 5 hours. I was able to share the gospel with him because his heart was so open. And I think since October the 7th, the hearts of the Israeli people are open to the Lord. And I don't think Israel's ever been where they are today. And that's why I'm so hopeful that God is doing something incredible despite the tragedy, despite the massacre that we saw on October the 7th.
Yeah, well, thank you. Our time's really evaporated so quickly, and we haven't really had time to talk about your visit to the north, because you went up to the northern border. But briefly, you know, in a minute or in a sentence or two, what was that like up on the northern border?
Quite chilling.
Yes.
Quite chilling. The fact that we know that war could break out any moment between Israel and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, right on the border. I think one thing we noticed as well is that there's an incredible resolve, and amongst those Israelis that work in security and with the army, they say, look, the next stage is Hezbollah. We can't afford to see the massacre that took place on October the 7th in the south, whilst leaving Hezbollah, the genocidal terrorist organization in southern Lebanon, with anything between 160 and 200,000 rockets and missiles aimed at Israel, knowing that at any moment they could carry out their own October the 7th. And it was only the mercy of God that prevented Hezbollah from carrying out a joint attack, as that was the original plan with Hamas. So I think we've got to pray for protection for Israel, and pray that Israeli soldiers are protected under the precious blood of Yeshua HaMashiach, and that Israel needs to do what they need to do in order to live in peace in what is the most dangerous region of the world.
Yeah. Thank you. And just finally, Reagan, just one brief takeaway that you took from the Envision Solidarity conference event at ICEJ. But what do you take away from it?
The people of Israel lives. And as we witnessed that sense of resolve, and as we witnessed really the sense of hope that's there, regardless of the atrocity, it will continue to live until Messiah comes again.
Thank you. Well, there's so much more we could have chatted about tonight, and it's been very insightful. And thank you for you both for sharing your experiences there. And maybe we should have a part 2 on this, because there's just so much we could chat about. But I just want to thank you for joining us tonight on this Jerusalem Dispatch webinar. I hope it's been a blessing to you. And can I just encourage you all to be involved with us in the prayer, the ongoing prayer. Get in touch with the office if you want to get to join up with our Rosh Kodesh prayer, which is twice weekly on Monday evening and Wednesday morning. And there's also the daily international prayer meeting that takes place from Jerusalem. That's at 2 o'clock every day. If you contact us, we can give you more details. And thank you for supporting the work of ICEJ. Your prayers, your giving is making a difference, and want to challenge you again to keep praying and keep giving. There's so much need, and there's so much opportunities for us to comfort the people of Israel, which is our mandate. So I want to say a big thank you to Reagan and Simon for sharing your thoughts and hearts with us tonight, and just want to bless you all and thank you all for being with us tonight. And we trust that you've been blessed and encouraged, as well as built up by being equipped to be able to stand up against the lies that are, constantly being thrown around about Israel and the Jewish people. This is the time for us to stand up and be identified with them like never before. So God bless you. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to you joining us again next month. Good night and God bless.